Once you have an idea of the types of spaces you need, the size they need to be, how they need to function, you can start to develop the plan and pull it together. Um, as an interior designer, we are typically given some fixed elements of the building, and those will impact the design. We have to design around them. So, in an office space, usually where your elevators and stairwells and restrooms are, especially if it's a multi story building, those are set and they can't be moved. Um, so, you have to work around that. You need to understand too, are you working with a very traditional formal building that's going to be designed differently than a modern space? So take into account the architecture that you're given to work with it. So older buildings had a lot more walls because that was what was needed for load bearing structures. And so that's where you had more walls, more corridors, etc. Frank Lloyd Wright, we've talked about him a few times already, but he really was the innovator who led the way for moving away from box design, so a lot of just enclosed spaces, and starting to create those open spaces, and really lets us, as we've talked about, see walls as design elements and not just something that's holding up the ceiling as it goes through. When you're looking at residential spaces, you may have more enclosed spaces because bedrooms, bathrooms, closets, a lot of things, they have to be able to be enclosed. It's just for privacy needs, that's what's needed. However, in commercial design spaces, you really try to push that boundary and what really needs to be closed off versus what can be open to serve the residents and the visitors. Commercial facilities, when you're doing commercial design work, they are often in a lease space. So your tenant, that your client that you are designing for, they may not own the building. And so they're going to have certain rules that you have to design within that space. So you need to understand that. There's other things like shallow and deep layouts. So for example, what they're talking about when talking about shallow or deep, a shallow plan, you've got from the core to the perimeter. So your core is where your hallways, your elevators, restrooms usually are, and your perimeter is where your windows are. So for this one, it's very shallow. And it has pros and cons. Pro of it is it's easier to get light all the way through it because you have less space. The con might be it's a little bit more difficult, can be to develop the space because it's narrower. A deep plan, you're going to have the core here and then the perimeters all the way over here. This one will be harder to get light all the way through, but it also gives you more flexibility on the types of spaces you use. Where columns are set will also impact your design. So with larger, especially with a deep plan, you're going to have more columns to give support to the building. Those cannot be moved. And so you need to work them into your design and understand where they are. So here's an example where you've got, here's your columns. You can see these squares right through here. They're giving you an example here. You could have furniture that uses the columns as a grounding element as it goes through. Here, they've built the wall off the center line of the column so it works with it. On this side, they've used the columns again to ground the furniture, but it's floating in between it. You can also center it on there. So again, these, use them to ground and align your elements. And again, if you go back and look at that, but use those as part of the design and not just feel like you need to design around them.